Senator J.D. Vance, Republican, Ohio, called it a grave error to send an aid package that had both Israel content in it and funding for Ukraine, as being untenable and causing a complete fight over Israel aid that would not do the country any good and would not help get Israel aid where it needed to go rapidly. Here's the story. What we have is a very simple situation where Joe Biden has tried to force over $60 billion of additional aid to Ukraine into a package with about 15, 16 million of aid to Israel, and try to say, well, if you don't pass the Ukraine money, or you don't get the Israel money. And what's more, he's put in money for, get this, for Hamas, humanitarian aid in Gaza and in the West Bank, supporting the Palestinian Authority and supporting the Hamas government in Gaza. So we're going to support the terrorists. We're going to provide military assistance, primarily defensive military assistance for Israel, by giving them the material they need to keep the Iron Dome working, which shoots down a lot of the missiles that are being shot at them, and some other defensive material that they need. But we're sitting there saying, but we're going to continue to fund $60 billion in Ukrainian funding. There's a strong opposition growing against Ukrainian funding and wanting real accountability for Ukrainian funding. Here's what Vance had to say. He in a memo that he sent out, he said, Israel has a clear plan, and we have a clear means of helping them to fulfill that plan by providing very specific munitions to enable Israel to conduct a limited operation with a view to neutralizing the threat Hamas poses to Israel. We have no such plan for the Russia-Ukraine war. Our assistance to Ukraine is neither well-scoped nor secure, and includes funding for Ukrainian farmers, subsidies for Ukrainian small businesses, and payments for Ukrainian first responders. Now, I don't have any problem against Ukrainian farmers. I don't have any problems against any of those things. But essentially what we're doing is we're propping up the government of Ukraine with funding, as well as, and to the tune of another $60 billion. We don't know how much that money actually gets the people it's intended to get to. And there's been no accountability and no willingness of the Biden administration to actually show accountability for Ukraine spending. So whether you agree with Ukraine spending or not, the fact of the matter is we have put a lot of money, $100 billion into Ukraine, plus into Ukraine so far, that we have to borrow. And we don't have we can't tell where it's going. So in this aid package, so Vance continues in his evaluation. He talks about the funding proposal, $61.4 billion for Ukraine, $14.3 billion for Israel, with $10.6 billion allocated for military aid, $13.6 billion for border protection, including measures to combat the flow of fentanyl. Here's what the border protection is, by the way. They want to hire a bunch of border patrol agents, but not to patrol the border, to basically process the illegals entering, and in processing the illegals entering more rapidly, allowing them to clear the border, the backlog at the border, to provide transportation for the illegals to be shipping them around the country, to provide money to the non-government organizations that are housing the illegals all over the country, to provide assistance to cities like New York, which is being overrun with illegals now, so you can pay for those 5-star hotels for the illegals to stay in. Those are that's what that money is. It isn't about securing the border. It's about processing the border more rapidly and having the money to actually move people around the country which is what the Biden administration's plan is. It isn't to control the border. It's to basically disperse the people from the border with no accountability and make certain that this invasion not only is it long-term and permanent. That's what Joe Biden's plan is, and there's no way in hell we should give him money for that. Let's see what else Vance had to say. He had a pretty good. Vance outlined 5 main points in terms of the Israeli operations. Israeli operation will help secure the Gaza Strip. The Ukraine war has jeopardized the European security architecture and threatens global disorder. 2, our political and military relationship with Israel is qualitatively different from our relationship with Ukraine. 3, Israel has a qualitatively different defense capability than Ukraine. 4, Israel has an achievable objective, Ukraine does not. 5, the U.S. does not have a plan in Ukraine, but we do have a plan in Israel. Pretty basic. Should be the basic, if you don't have a plan for winning, what are you doing? And that's essentially that's what he's saying here. So JD Vance, good job, way to go, way to stick up. And we have to get the Israeli aid separated from the Ukraine aid, and then within the Israeli package, we have to take a hard look at the money that's being sent to Hamas. For instance, we know $105 million is earmarked directly to go to aid in Gaza right now. The government in Gaza is Hamas. Understand, they are the government. They're the elected government in Hamas. So, you can go in there with the UN, you can go in there with other non-governmental organizations, but the fact of the matter is they're going into a war zone, and they're bringing in medical supplies, they're bringing in food, they're bringing in water. Well, that food and water is going to end up feeding the Hamas fighters, because they'll just blend in and be civilians while they go and collect all this stuff, and then they'll take it into the tunnels where they're masked up and ready to go to fight against the Israeli troops. So, humanitarian aid sounds like a really good thing. Truth of the matter is, if you want to protect the civilians in Gaza, you have to get the civilians out of Gaza. That's the key. If you're not, and since neither Egypt nor Jordan nor Saudi Arabia are interested in housing those refugees, and they're not interested in housing them because they know they'll never go home, there's absolutely you have a very difficult problem, but the problem is not solved by sending money into a place controlled by the enemy, by the attackers. There's no excuse to reward Hamas by allowing Hamas to have $100 million worth of money that effectively will go to keep Hamas in power. That's the insanity of this. Until that basic piece is solved, there should be no money for Gaza. No money for Gaza. As long as Hamas is holding hostages, no money for Gaza. As long as Hamas's leadership is still sitting there fat and happy in Qatar, in five-star hotels in Qatar, while bragging about their great assault, their military assault on a music festival, bragging about that. As long as those people are not brought to justice for being terrorists and murderers, as long as that's not happening, absolutely zero aid, financial aid, to those, to the people who Hamas governs. That is the problem. Hamas is their government. So you have to eliminate Hamas as being the government in Gaza, and totally disconnect Hamas from having any legitimacy. And Palestinian Authority, they're going to give money to the Palestinian Authority? That's their plan? We're going to give humanitarian assistance to somebody who was not involved, and yet has threatened Israel's security for the past 25 years, who took the land for peace deal, and all they had to do was mind their P's and Q's, and they would have ended up having a second state, but they wouldn't do it. And they kept launching attack after attack after attack on Israel, and terrorist attack after terrorist attack. Yeah, no, I mean, this is insane to give the Palestinian Authority any money. And yet, that's what Biden wants to do. Yeah, we need to break the Ukraine and the Israeli pact pieces apart, but then we have to look laser focus on what's the money for Israel. Make sure the money's going to Israel's military needs above everything else. And if you want to come back with a package to rebuild Gaza with Hamas out as the government, then come back later on. But right now, that's not the right strategy. Our taxpayer dollars should not go for that. We need to make certain that Israel is supplied, so Israel isn't overrun by attackers from the north, the Hezbollah, from the east through Jordan, where Iran is sending their attackers, sending troops, terrorist troops to do it, from Yemen, where the Houthis, who Joe Biden has took off the terrorist list, have launched rockets against Israel, cruise missiles against Israel. Who knew the Houthis had cruise missiles? But they do. I mean, the world is on fire over there. Joe Biden set it on fire, and now he wants to give money to the people who were busy running around lighting more fires. If the Biden administration, was ever right, you might give them the benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to the Middle East, they are always wrong. Their policies are wrong. Their approach is wrong. And the Senate and the House need to reject the Biden aid package as it stands. And the first step is to split Ukraine and Israel aid and take the border security aid that's separate and take a look at it and come together with a border security package that makes sense rather than the catch and release funding that Joe Biden is insisting upon. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government.